Okay, it's Saturday, April 6th, right? 2019.
Yes.
And I'm sitting with my mother-in-law.
And I'm sitting with my daughter-in-law.
Oh, see? We're sitting here on this lovely day in Roswell out on her porch and checking out all of these beautiful, beautiful flowers. And we keep trying to record just a little video talking about your childhood, and my phone keeps stopping. So thanks for doing a take 3. It's like you're a famous actress now. You just gotta, take all these takes till we get the lighting right.
I know. Come on.
Everything. Come on.
Come on, sunshine.
Let's
get the
it
lighting
going.
right.
Let's get it going. All right. So you were born February 18th of what year?
1943. It was during World War II.
Okay. And where were you born?
Miami, Florida.
And Jackson, I think you said? Jackson
Memorial Hospital.
Yeah.
And my daddy was in World War I, but he wasn't in World War II because he was born in 1899.
Wow.
So when World War I started, I think Daddy was like 18, and he went to France. And of course, he was a very coddled young boy from a very wealthy family, and I'm sure that was quite an upbringing to live out in a field of mud and try to get the enemy out of the way.
Oh my gosh. So you were born in Miami, in Jackson. And then where did you live?
I lived in the Shadowlawn area until I was 12. Shadowlawn was closer to town, like 46th Street. And then we moved to Miami Shores. We were on 94th Street, so we moved that many blocks north. And Mama finally got to buy her own little house.
Oh, that's what she
And
wanted,
she loved her little house. And I grew up there until I got married.
Okay.
Or went to college, but that's where I would go home on the holidays.
And what are some of your earliest memories from the first place you lived?
Oh, we had a huge mulberry tree. And I would climb the mulberry tree. My mother told me not to climb the mulberry tree, but I did climb the mulberry tree. Because it was very inviting. It had these huge branches, and 2 of them were like this. So you could like make a little nest in there. And so I would eat mulberries and sit in the mulberry tree.
Wow. How old do you think you were then?
Oh, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Itty bitty. You were a little girl. And where did you go to school?
Well, first I went to Shadowlawn Elementary for 1st through 6th grade, 5th grade. And then we moved to Miami Shores, and I went to another elementary school, which was Miami Shores Elementary. And then I went to Horseman Junior High, which was down the street. And then I went to Edison High School, which my girlfriend had a car, and we drove down there because you couldn't walk.
And was that a girlfriend you still keep in touch with?
Yes, her name was Cheryl.
Cheryl.
And she lives in Concord, North Carolina now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And very, very good friends in high school.
Yeah. And what were your parents doing when you were growing up?
My daddy had a car lot. And then after that, he worked for Hertz rental company. So again, he was working with cars.
Okay. Didn't you once say something about a sign that old cars or something that your
Used
dad...
cars. He had a used car lot on Biscayne Boulevard. Jack Peavy Used Cars.
And that you remember from when you were a little kid?
Yeah.
Did you ever go and visit?
Sometime Mama and I, if we went downtown, we'd stop and see Daddy on the way.
Yeah.
And we finally had a car when I was maybe in junior high school. Before that, we just walked everywhere because we lived in a walkable neighborhood.
So your dad walked to work?
No, my daddy had a car.
He had a car.
Because he sold
Needed
cars.
That. Right.
And, yeah, that's what we did.
And what about your mom? Was she at home?
She stayed home until she was with me all the time until I got into junior high school. And junior high school was 3 blocks from my house. So I could walk to school and walk home. And she went down to the old part of Miami where we had lived before, like Northeast 50th Street, and worked for a very fine furniture company called Moore's Furniture Company.
Wow.
And Miss Sally, her name was Sarah Lou, but they called her Sally. Sally sold whatever they were selling, and she really enjoyed that.
She did.
And she liked having a little extra income.
Yeah. Now tell me, what were your parents' full names? What was your father's name?
My father had a very simple name, Jack Peavy.
And your mom?
Sarah Lou Barnes.
Sarah Lou Barnes. So Barnes was her maiden name?
And then she went to Sally, and then it was Sally Peavy.
Okay.
And she was Sally Peavy forever.
And they both were were they both born in Macon,
They
Georgia?
both grew up in Macon, but they were 10-year age difference, so they didn't know each other growing up.
Oh, wow. So when did they meet? Did they meet in Macon or in Florida, or do you know?
I think they met in Florida.
Yeah.
Because Daddy had come, like I said, he had a used car lot, and Mama worked at a furniture company. And that's when we lived in Shadowlaw. And then when we moved to Mama Shores, Mama still worked at the furniture company, but she eventually retired. And she wanted to be home every day when her girl came home from school.
I can understand that.
It was very nice. I had a good family life.
You did. Who are some of the people that you still keep in touch with from your childhood? I know there's a few.
My early childhood, a girl named Susan Sutcliffe.
Mm-hmm.
And she lives somewhere out west now.
Mm-hmm.
But we would all walk to school because we walked, our elementary school was close.
Mm-hmm.
And we would walk to school, and then when it was time to play in the afternoon, I would either go to her house and play, or she would come to my house and play, and it was like 3 blocks apart.
Yeah.
So that's my childhood. And then we moved to Mama Shores, and I went to junior high, and then high school, and then Florida State. So that
Okay.
was my progression.
And was it in high school where you used to go to the movies a lot with a friend of yours? I think her family maybe owned a theater. Is that right?
Yes, Susan Sutcliffe. I went to the movies with her. Then I had another friend named Cheryl Claiborne,
Mm-hmm.
and this was mostly high school.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she had a car. It was like, oh wow, she's got a car.
Wow. And,
So we'd do stuff together.
and wasn't there a time you were doing some modeling? When was that?
When I was in high school and in college, we worked at Burdine's downtown.
Mm-hmm. In Miami.
In Miami, and I took the bus because we didn't have an extra car.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't mind taking the bus. So I would go to work at Burdine's, and then after doing that for a couple of years, I went to work at Jordan Marsh, which was maybe a mile closer to my home, but I still took the bus because that's what we did. And I enjoyed sales. I always did well in sales,
Yeah.
and
That was your thing.
that's what I did.
What about church life when you were a kid? Were you
When I
all
was
involved?
a child, I went to a Methodist church near our home when we lived in Shadowlawn,
Mm-hmm.
and I would walk, and Mother would give me a handkerchief, and she would put change in the handkerchief, and then she would tie it up, and that's what I would give in my Sunday school class.
Oh, nice.
And then later, when we moved to the Shores, I went to junior high and high school from there,
Okay.
and then Florida State.
And how did you wind up at Florida State?
Most all of my friends went to Florida. They wanted to go to Florida State. Florida State, when I was growing up, was a better school for girls than University of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
University of Florida was a little wild back then. I don't know whether you faced that. But I went to Florida State and lived in the dorm, and then pledged a sorority, and then lived in the sorority house.
Which sorority?
Kappa Alpha Theta.
Mm-hmm.
And then my second year in school, my daddy called me. Well, we didn't have cell phones then.
Yep.
He would call the number at the either the sorority house or the dormitory where I lived. And my father was very brusque. He would say, "Suzanne, this is your father." "Hi, Daddy, how are you? You need to come home. Your mother's dying of cancer." Okay.
Oh.
So she died at 52. And I was like 20.
And you were taking care of her.
Well, I went down there to take care of her, but let's see, that was 63. I don't remember a lot of details, but she didn't live very long.
Yeah.
But I stayed there, and then I stayed there with Daddy
Yeah.
for a while, too, because he was like totally unable to take care of himself.
It was a whole change of his
He
life.
was
huh?
one of these Southern gentlemen who didn't do nothing. If it wasn't the maids, which we didn't have, it was the wife.
Okay. So you stayed down there.
I lived there. Let's see, I lived in Mama Shores. Then, let's see, I went to Florida State. I lived in Tallahassee for a while. I married in Tallahassee, and that was Lauren's daddy. He was Warren, and Warren got a PhD and taught at Mama Dade Junior College for decades. He's retired now. We're about the same age. He was a nice man. It really wasn't the total right choice. But the bonus was Lauren,
Of course.
the big bonus.
And
then
how old were you when Lauren was born?
20.
And what do you remember about her as a little girl or a baby?
Oh, she was this little 5-pound, 13-ounce little rat child. Oh, she was beautiful. She had a head full of black hair, which never, I mean, it was always brown after that. She was tiny, 5'13". I stayed in Tallahassee. I was married to her daddy, Warren. I worked at the college. And then my daddy called me one day, I probably told you this, and said, Suzanne, come home, your mother's dying of cancer. So I went home. And I think I went back briefly after mother passed, but I was working to put my way through school.
Sure.
And my daddy never made a lot of money. He made enough for us to live on.
Yeah.
And mother worked part-time to make sure she could buy me prom dresses and shoes.
And all that kind of
Because
stuff.
she was a good mama.
And so where were you with Lauren when Lauren was a little girl? Where was Lauren growing up?
We moved back to Mama Shores with my dad because my mother had died. My dad was totally helpless.
Yeah.
And he was raised by a very wealthy family. They had servants. And so Daddy would he didn't know how to cook. He didn't know how to do anything. And so I went home and Lauren, he adored Lauren. I mean, she was this beautiful little baby girl. And we stayed with her until I met Warren.
Bob?
No, Warren.
Oh.
Warren is Lauren's
Right.
father. We went back to Florida State. I was 20 years old. I was very naive. Just like, oops, I'm pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
So she was born in Tallahassee, little teeny baby girl. And then my daddy was totally fallen. I did bring Lauren home to see my mother right before she died. And then I went back to Florida State because I was taking classes and Warren was teaching and taking classes. And my daddy was like he had no idea how to take care of himself. He was raised in a very Southern family growing up with servants. They were wealthy. And then mother took care of everything from then on. So I came home and I went to work. Lauren had someone take care of her, and I would cook for dinner at night because he was the typical helpless man. And they don't make them anymore, I don't think. But that generation was so dependent upon their wives and their servants. We did have a maid occasionally, but we were never servant people.
And what year was it that your mother passed?
63.
In 63.
Lauren was born in November of 63, and mother died in December of 63.
Okay. And then when did you meet Bob? And that was in Miami, right? So you were living in...
I think I met him in Miami. Yes, Warren stayed in Tallahassee. He was getting his PhD. And I don't know what happened with our marriage, but it just kind of wasn't there anymore. So we got a very amicable, whatever you say, divorce. And I married Bob, which I'm really sorry I did. But it's water under the bridge. And I did have a good daughter, Catherine, and a good son, Robert, from that marriage. And then Lauren was, of course, from my first marriage.
Yes. So you met Bob in Miami. And you all lived down there for quite a while, and you were involved in your church, in your group.
Yes, I lived with my parents, and then we moved to North Miami Beach, and we lived there for a while. And he was working, and Lauren was going to an elementary school in North Miami. I think Kathy and Robert were still at home.
Okay. And then when did you move to Georgia? Do you remember? In the early 70s,
I
think.
You hadn't asked me.
I
We moved here in the early 70s, I think. I was very active in my church. I was a Bible teacher and a pastor. I was asked to, I traveled. I was asked to teach in Canada, Texas, California.
And what were you teaching specifically?
I taught Bible.
You taught Bible, okay.
And
to kids, to adults, to everyone?
Adults.
Adults.
Yeah, it was adult. In fact, we had huge meetings 3 or 4 times a year where all the adults would come together at a particular town and have a big, like, week-long meeting, and I would always teach there too. By then I was married to Bob. Yeah.
Yep. And you had all 3 kids.
Well,
And
Lauren
you-
was first, and then I had Catherine, then I had Robert, and the last 2 were Bob's children.
Yep. And then you all moved here together. And you lived down where, somewhat near Mansell
We lived at the
Road.
farm. We
Yeah.
lived at the farm on Old Roswell Road with the big red barn and the big white house and the big pasture and the big pond and the cows and the horses and the fish.
And what was that like?
It was so totally different than growing up in Miami.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that really leans toward that kind of life, you know. Just, of course, I didn't work in the garden, but we had a lot of young people who did, and I was willing to. Oh no, Miss Suzie, we're going to do it. So we did that, and then it came time for me to leave. I just laid down my ministry,
Yeah.
and I drove up. I'd never been to this side of town. I'd never been past Alpharetta Highway,
Wow.
or Canton Street. So I drove up and down all these streets, and there was this little house with a for sale sign on
This
it.
one right here?
Right here.
37 Goulding Place?
37 Goulding Place.
Wow.
And we moved in, and we had to add on because there was Lauren, Catherine, Robert. And we lived, I had a wonderful friend named Celine Candace. She did silhouettes. If you've ever seen the silhouettes in my upstairs hall, Celine did those. And we had to move out when they raised the roof on the house because it was too small. And we lived in Celine's basement. It was a totally finished apartment. And we were there about 6 months, and then we came back.
Wow.
So we came back to a bigger house, and all that down there was woods. The houses stopped 2 houses down. It was all woods. And I would walk back there all the time and sit by the little pond. But this has been a good place for me.
Yeah.
It just fell into place.
This felt like home when you got here. Tell me, what were your kids? I know you mentioned what Lauren was like as a kid. What was Kathy like as a little girl? Or
Kathy was a handful.
when was she born? You were...
October 28th, 1966.
Okay. And what was she like when she was born, and how did...
She was a pretty normal little baby.
Yeah,
And then she got older, and it was like, oh, she was a ball of fire.
she was. And what about Robert? Do you remember when Robert
he was cool.
born?
He was cool. He was 9 pounds 1 ounce.
And tell me that poem.
Holly House is full of joy. We've added now our baby boy. Robert Lee Holly is his name. Number 2 to have the saying is weight, get this, 9 pounds 1 ounce, 281.5 inches of bounce. The girls are delighted. We're all full of joy. Won't you come see our brand new baby boy?
And who wrote that?
Me.
Of course. In all your free time with your 3 kids and new bouncing baby boy.
Oh, he was a bouncing baby boy, I'm telling you. He was 9 pounds 1 ounce. He looked like he was 3 months old when he was born. He was a delightful baby. Never gave me any trouble. I tried to nurse him until he tried to suck my breast off my body. And then I couldn't do that
And you said
anymore.
that's enough.
I said, okay, get me the bottle.
And how were Lauren and Kathy with Robert when were they
very-
happy when he
yeah,
was
they
born?
were happy with him. They were good to him. They didn't do anything mean to him.
And you were all here in 37.
Goulding Place, yeah.
Oh, they were already kids by then. Yeah.
Wait a minute. We moved
Yeah.
from here to the farm, and
You moved from Miami to the farm.
the farm.
So they were all born in Florida. And then by the time you came to Georgia, they were all born.
Tallahassee and the
Yeah.
North Miami Hospital for the last 2.
Yeah.
Then I came here and lived in the old farmhouse on Old Roswell Road
Right.
with the red barn.
And then you
Then
found this house.
it was time for me to lay my ministry
Yeah.
down. So I never knew this part of town, but I drove everywhere.
That's
I
what
found,
and then you found this
found
spot.
the house
And-
for sale.
Yep.
Okay.
And there you
So
go.
I called the number on the sign, and they wanted $40,000 for it.
Oh my gosh. What
course
year
it was-
around? That was in the early...
It was 60.
In the
no,
70s.
What was it? No,
It was
it
in
was
the
70,
70s.
77.
Yeah. Somewhere
Um,
around there.
When I bought this property, I bought this house, and the land, the lot next door was all part of it. And they asked $40,000, and I gave them $38,500. That was all I was going to give them.
There you go.
And then, after a few years, when Kathy grew up and got married, her daddy, Bob, sold her that property for $25,000. Now, I would have given it to her, but, you know, everyone's different. So she built that house and lived there a very long time until they decided to sell and move where they are now in the
And
gated
now
community.
Sally and Rob live there. Sally and Rob McKenzie,
Yes, and
right?
they're very nice people.
And you made a lot of friends over the years on Goulding Place, right? Gail Hecko lived here.
When Gail lived
And Jim and...
in the big gray house down there,
Yep.
Jim and who?
Jean McClyman.
They lived over there
Mm-hmm.
in the White House.
Yep.
Kathy built the house next door and lived there for a long time and then
Mhm.
sold it. And then all that new stuff began to the street just a few years ago.
Yeah.
It hasn't been there for a long, long time.
Yep. What about don't you have a half sister?
Margaret.
How is Margaret connected? How
Well,
is she
my
related?
father, she's 21 years older than I am.
Okay.
My father was married before, and he married her mother.
Do you know her mother's name? No.
I could find out, but I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know it.
Not off the top of your head. So,
So
your
anyway.
father had been married before and had Margaret.
Margaret.
Was she an only child?
Yes.
Okay.
And then he kind of left town, I think.
Who?
This was in Atlanta.
Your father?
Yeah, he left there and came to Miami. I don't think he was a very good father. I don't think he had any money.
When he was
to speak
married
of.
before?
I mean, when he moved to Miami, he did. I was too young to know about. Daddy, are you paying child support? I didn't know about that. And my sister Margaret was 21 years my senior. She never had children. She married a very wealthy man.
Was his name Ned?
Ned Hitt, and she was Margaret Hitt. And
okay, yeah.
she was tall, dark-haired, rather a very large woman, whereas I'm more of a normal-sized woman, and you're a petite woman. She was a good person, and she was good to me when we moved here. But then her husband died, and then she died, so that took care of that.
Now, didn't she... I feel like there were some debutante stories way back when, or did she have...
Oh, she made her debut in Atlanta when she was growing up, living with her mother and her stepfather. So that was like, I don't know, 20s, 30s, I don't know, long time ago.
And what was the connection to Margaret Mitchell?
Margaret Mitchell was a friend of my sister Margaret's, and that's how she knew her. I never met Margaret Mitchell. I think my sister knew her, in the past. But my sister was very smart. She was, they were very wealthy, and I saw a lot of her when I moved here. I saw a lot of her.
You did.
And sometimes she'd come up here, but I'd usually go down there to Buckhead. And then Ned died, her husband, and then she died. And that was that.
What are some of the memories in Roswell? You worked for a while at the rug.
Roswell Rug Company, I did. And it was for a few years. That's when I met Sally.
Sally Shook.
Because she came to work there. And we just immediately bonded. And I worked at the rug store for a few years. And then for some reason, I don't know why, I quit working there. But I did. And Lauren went to college and graduated. Robert got scholarships and went to college and graduated. And he's very smart. Kathy just decided to stay home and have babies.
She did a good job
And
having
she
those.
had good babies, yeah. Can't
And
complain.
how has the town of Roswell right here changed? What was it like on Canton Street?
Very quiet. And the houses stopped. At the gray house down there where Gail used to live, on the right-hand side, everything beyond that on both sides was wood, deep, deep woods. I came home one day and they were taking down all the trees. I was like, well, damn it.
That was just a few years ago, because I met you in 2010 and they were all still here.
Well,
So it's been in the last few
all
years.
those houses go for like $1.3 million. God, I got mine for $38.5.
Such a change.
Plus an extra lot.
Yeah, such a change.
It was the time, and it was the economy and what was happening.
Yeah.
But I did work a lot when I was married. In Miami, I worked at Burnouts and Jordan Marsh. Here, I worked at Roswell Rug. I substitute taught a lot.
Did you? Where did you do that?
Wherever school called me.
Yeah,
Roswell,
elementary or...
Roswell Elementary, Roswell High, Roswell Junior High. You know, they were, of course, all those schools are gone. Elementary schools there, but the high schools are all gone. They took them down and built apartments or something. I don't know.
Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, you're so welcome.
And we'll do more, I hope. I just thought it'd be nice to get to hear little bits about your life. I know different things come up in our brains on different days. So
That's you never know what's going to happen
you
next.
never know what's going to pop up. But thanks for doing this.
Well, thanks for asking me. And, of course, I am so delighted that you and Robert found each other. I can't think of a better combination.
Well, I'm so delighted to be a part of this family and to have you as my MIL. So thanks for doing
my
this.
DIL.
And I'm your DIL. Signing off now.
Signing off. Love you, baby.
Love you.